My name is Jordan Wilson. I'm on the board of the CFA Society Saskatchewan. And this podcast will be one of the conversations that we're going to have with some CFAs who work and live in Saskatchewan. Today I'm joined by Juliana Wong, who is currently the president of our CFA Society in Saskatchewan. We're going to spend some time going through Juliana's background, and we're going to touch on some of the issues that 𝐕𝐵𝐻𝐚𝐿𝐿𝐵 and I raised and discussed in some of our other speaker series. Things like, do you need to have a finance background to become a CFA? Are all CFAs financial analysts? What about personality and risk appetite? Are we all back office introverts? How does that work? Diversity in finance, culturally, gender, hiring advice such as complementary hard and soft skills. So those are sort of things we're going to walk through with Juliana. And Juliana is currently a senior capital markets director with Concentra Bank, and she's based in Regina. She manages Concentra's funding pricing through the wholesale market, indirect channels, and the capital markets. She also oversees liquidity in terms of portfolio investments, cash management, and the management of credit facilities. So quite an interesting background for a CFA. Before she joined Concentra, Juliana worked in the pension industry for a while and with an asset management company. Juliana graduated from the University of British Columbia with a Bachelor of Arts, focusing on mathematics and economics, and obviously is a CFA Charterholder. So welcome, Juliana. And I think the first question I'd like to ask you is just maybe, what led to getting into economics and mathematics in university? Because we found when we looked at diversity as an issue that a lot of women weren't interested in going into math or finance for whatever reason. And Robin did. She loved math as a girl. And I'm curious, what led you as a young girl to say, I want to pursue economics and math in university?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Thanks for having me here. That's a really good question because my journey in, studying mathematics, it didn't always start with that. Originally, when I was in high school, I was interested in fashion design. I thought that was a career path I was gonna go down, but obviously parents persuaded me otherwise. But I was good at math, so anything related to mathematics, I always had really good grades. So when I got into university, I didn't really specifically look for a degree in mathematics or anything. My first year, I wanted to try many different type of courses, and eventually, getting good grades, I guess, is a really strong indicator that this is perhaps something that you're good at. And so I started taking more courses in economics and math, and that's eventually where I landed.
Now, the one question that always comes up for me with economics, and on our board currently, there's yourself, there's Dan Sumner, who has a master's in economics, and our past president, Mark Smith-Windsor, is also an economics major. So the first question that I always have with economics is, are there any jobs for economics graduates these days? Like, it's a fairly finite, defined, narrow graduate. So if you were coming out with economics, could you have a career in economics very easily?
Yeah, for sure. I think in economics, you have a very broad skill set, right? You're studying how to make decisions individually, as a small business owner, corporation, country, to, as big as IMF and United Nations. They're big employers of economists. And so there isn't really a specific title that you look for. You can apply for different types of jobs, anywhere from marketing to anything that's more related to statistics. But you're right; it's much more broader than I find it's than a finance major or studying accounting.
Okay, so you have to make your own career path based on the skill sets that you developed.
Yeah, exactly. So it really depends on, in a way, what your minor is. You can sort of lean towards international relations, or I did another major in mathematics. However, your minor can be something closer to law. So there's different avenues you can go down.
Okay. Now, at what point in time after graduating did you decide, okay, I have an economics major, math major, I'm going to pursue this chartered financial analyst designation? At what point did you say, I'm going to make that switch into pure finance?
Yeah, that's a good question. At first, when I was studying mathematics and economics, I didn't know there was a CFA option that one can pursue after university. When I was in university, because I'm in the mathematics faculty, I was more exposed to actuarial science. So I actually did some exams, and I did a couple. And eventually, I wasn't too interested in the topics that's related to casualty insurance. I find it a bit morbid for me in a way, but seeing that there's actually a path to becoming, for example, an investment consultant, instead of taking 9 actuarial exams, you could instead do a CFA. You could do CFA exam instead. So that's when I started to hear about CFA and look into it.
Okay. Now, one of the things that Robin and I discussed was that my background is as a chartered accountant, a financial accountant. And the CFA program for me, especially in levels 1 and 2, is so heavy on financial reporting, quantitative analysis, these sort of things that are skills that as a chartered accountant I developed, so it made it a lot easier for me. Now, if I look at my experience in the program, levels 1 and a bit in level 2 is also very heavily, the curriculum is on economics. So did you find having that economics and math background helpful to get through the program?
Yes, for sure, definitely. Having an economics background helped me get through level 1 and level 2 of the program. Anything related to derivatives or corporate finance. But obviously, like you said, level 1 is 40% of the curriculum is based on accounting. So, but I learned a lot from level 1. I don't know anything about accounting, so it was definitely a plus for me.
Now, I don't quite understand this. We're financial analysts. Why did we need to study economics in our CFA curriculum? How
Yeah.
does that sort of, why is it useful for a CFA to understand economics?
Yeah, for sure. So, economics, I guess you can break it into two segments. One is microeconomics, one is macroeconomics. Microeconomics has to do with supply and demand, and how you can maximize your profit with the resources that you have. And economics is it's more focused on the higher level of the functioning of an economy. It's more focused on GDP, unemployment rate, inflation, and at the same time, it's not purely about numbers. It's more about efficiency, stability, the wellness of a nation. So it's applicable to everybody, and so I think that translates to everyone's work, because as you think about your analysis, it's not always quantitative. There's always a qualitative aspect of a discussion. So I think having an economics background helps you form your framework per se.
Yeah, and I just add to that is I think that anyone can crunch numbers. You put the numbers in, you get your ratios out. It's the ability to qualitatively analyze the data that separates the strong from the weak in investing finance. And I think the other area that you touched on there is there's kind of two general approaches to investing or finance. There's the bottom-up approach, and there's the top-down approach, where we're looking at macroeconomic issues on a global basis, a regional basis, a country basis, and then we're drilling down into the countries and the sectors and the industries that are going to be perceived as going in the right direction for investing. So to me, that's the value of the economic side, at least for me.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And currently, in my role, economics plays a really big part, because we pay really close attention to the interest rate, to manage our interest rate risk, duration risk, and so we pay close attention to where the overnight rate is and the yield curve, because that really can make a big difference in our profitability, considering a lot of the assets and liability are priced off market rates.
Yeah, so if you want to become a CFA, whether you go through economics or finance or any other field, you do have to learn a fair bit about economics regardless.
Absolutely.
Now, the other question that always comes up with entering the CFA program is, should I start the CFA program immediately after university? And the argument there tends to be that my brain is fresh, I'm still in the study mode from college, and it's easy for me to get into the CFA program. Now, the other argument tends to be, at least in my case, is that having a few years of business experience gave me some real world information and knowledge that I could apply when I was in the program. And that helped me. And I think on an economic side, I took the macro and micro courses in university, but you don't really understand elasticities and marginal utilities and things like that until you're actually out in the real world when it hits you. And then you go, holy smoke, I get it now. And I think if I'd started, in my own case, the CFA program immediately after school, I wouldn't have had that personal experience to draw on to help me get through the program. So I'm curious, just sort of, there's pros and cons, but you probably waited a couple of years after graduating before starting the program. So would you have preferred to have started immediately after graduating, or do you think it was better in your case to wait a few years?
Yeah, for myself, I think everyone is different. It depends on your journey. I didn't know that, finance is an area that I wanted to pursue. So I waited a little bit, have more work experience, and really gauge the field of finance. And eventually, this is a field that I want to progress in. So that's when I started studying the CFA exam. To me, it's a journey. It's not, it's not something that it's not another piece of paper that I needed to add to my degree. So I took my time with CFA program.
Okay. Now, if we move forward a year or two, you're out on the West Coast. Now, most people from Saskatchewan or the prairies, they want to migrate to the ocean and the better winters. How did you end up in Saskatchewan and Regina?
Yeah, for sure. So, I worked in Vancouver, but when I was looking for another job, actually at that time I had a visa in Europe. I was doing a bit of traveling, and at that time, my thoughts were that, I'm gonna let the work, wherever I work, I'm gonna let that choose where I'm gonna live. But one thing I do know when I was looking for another job is that I don't want to get into a position or a job where I'm pigeonholed onto just working one specific task. And effectively, that actually eliminated a lot of the larger corporation. And that was my thought process at that time when I was looking for a job. Because of the oil boom, there were tons of opportunity in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and my next job just fell into place.
Okay. Now, I think you didn't want to be pigeonholed. That was specific to your personal desires and your personality. But I think that that's an interesting thing for people in general to consider is, yes, some people do like to specialize, but what is the advantage of not pigeonholing yourself?
Yeah, for sure. For me, you're right. Some people do like to specialize, and they're the expert in a specific process or task, and there's huge demand for them. To me, I want to take a step back and look at the forest instead of being in the weeds or so I'm still trying to learn about finance as a whole, and because I want to take a step back and learn a different sector of finance and how everything is intertwined. And that's the reason why I want to expand my role in a way where I'm still learning something new, but not about a specific task or function.
Yeah, and I think that for younger people that are listening to this, just starting careers or contemplating career paths, is that it's that overall perspective. And to me, I would use the analogy more of doors. If you sort of lock yourself in one career trajectory, then you're basically stuck in that path. Whereas if you're looking for opportunities to develop different skill sets and experiences that go onto your resume, then the doors open in a variety of directions as you move through life. And so I think that's an important thing. And that's, again, what Robin and I talked about with my CPA, Chartered Accountant designation, was the not limiting yourself on future opportunities. So that's sort of an interesting thing with what Juliana's saying is she kept her options open by deciding intentionally to find a role that gave her a variety of skill sets and experiences.
Yeah, no, that's right.
So one of the other issues that we talk about, especially in Saskatchewan, because Saskatchewan to me is obviously not a pure finance center in the true sense of the word, like investment banking, mutual fund companies, these sort of things. Toronto would be the predominant area in Canada, Calgary, Vancouver, to a lesser extent, maybe Montreal. So if I'm a University of Regina, University of Saskatchewan graduate who wants to pursue a finance career here, what do you suggest? Is there options in Saskatchewan? Do they have to consider moving to another province? What would you say?
Yeah, for sure. First off, I do want to say there are opportunities in Saskatchewan. Obviously, there's more finance related jobs in Toronto area, but I have to say that after you graduated, you're young. I would say move where there's a suitable role for you, even outside of Canada.
No, not at all. And I think in my case, since I moved outside of Canada and I've lived everywhere, I can relate to that. But I think the other thing with what we have to do a better job as the CFA Society is explain to business or advocate our positions as to why non-pure finance should consider CFAs. You look at Juliana talking about her economics and math backgrounds. That applies to so many different businesses. My accounting background, CFO, CEO of companies sort of thing. So there are roles that may not just be working as a pure equity analyst with TD Greystone or Westcap. Those are relatively limited in number in the province, but there still are a variety of non-traditional or non-stereotypical finance positions.
Yep, absolutely.
So now we're at Concentra in Regina. What exactly do you do there? I gave the overview, but what does that mean? And how have you progressed? I don't know how long you've been at Concentra, but how have you progressed in your role over time?
For sure. Yeah, I've been at Concentra almost 5 years now. So when I first joined Concentra, my role was more closely related to liquidity portfolio management and cash management, and at the same time, we provide capital market solution to our credit union clients.
Just to jump in, what the heck is capital market solutions? What's that mean?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that we assist our credit unions with. One is we help them transact their derivatives for them to hedge their position, either a mortgage for securitization or just loans on the book with long duration. Another thing that we assist them with is once they securitize their mortgage into MBS, we help them find funding, or we absorb that pool into our balance sheet.
That does sound like a lot of economics.
Yeah, it is quite a fair bit. Obviously, with the pandemic, you can see how that plays out when during the pandemic, everyone needed liquidity. There was a lot of securitization that happened. It's one of the tools that CMHC used, and it provided more liquidity or funding options to FIs. But right now, there's a lot of liquidity in the market or cash in the market. No one is securitizing because they don't have any need for funding. So there's ebbs and flows to that for sure.
Okay. So again, it sounds like you bring together some economics, some almost actuarial calculations, and some finance skills. So it's a nice blend that you've managed to find given your previous training and background. So the other question I would have is, what is your team at Concentra? Do you manage any staff? That kind of thing. Like, what's sort of the group dynamics that exist in your organization?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm within the treasury group. The capital markets report to the treasurer. So we're basically more of the front office function for the wholesale liability side of the balance sheet, in addition to managing our liquidity and funding. So we do have staff on our team that oversees that, in addition to middle office analytics function and back office that helps us settle all of our securities and collateral requirements.
And what's in your position or in the position of those around you is the compensation. One of the things that Robin and I discussed was in Robin's role as a pure wealth manager with Scotia, she, quote unquote, eats what she hunts. She gets paid a percentage of assets under management, that sort of stuff. So if she does well, she prospers, and if she doesn't do well, she suffers. Whereas the other extreme would be salary with some bonus based on your performance. And I'm guessing you don't have to eat what you hunt at Concentra.
Yeah, so I guess we would be the latter. Everybody in Concentra, we all obviously have a salary, and everybody, including support function, we have a bonus, but it depends which team you're on or which level you're on. So your salary can be more focused on a corporate level, or it can be more focused on the personal development.
So if I'm someone young and I'm interested in meeting with clients and outselling product and acquiring net new money every day, I would gravitate probably to a different type world. And in your world, maybe more for someone that prefers, I want that stability and consistency of a known salary that's not fluctuating based on how much I can acquire in new clients.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Even within a bank, if you're part of the capital markets or DCM group, your compensation would fluctuate a lot more than someone, say, for example, in the treasury group. So it just depends what life stage you're at. A lot of times when you're younger, you don't have a lot of responsibility, so that usually front office function attracts a lot of the newly graduates. But I guess as you progress, people usually divert to something that gives it more stability in a way.
Yeah, and I think just some people love that excitement of new situations and the risk factor. When Robin and I talked, I used to do a lot of mergers and acquisitions work where you're sort of doing nothing, and then suddenly you're working 100 hours in a week, trying to decide on, multi-million dollar deals. And if you get the answer wrong, your business is in trouble from the bad decisions. So that's also one of those opportunities that if you like that excitement, that's different. But definitely, that's more of a young person's game, those 100-hour weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
So if we kind of look at another issue that Robin and I covered in our series was, for whatever reason, women tend to be underrepresented in finance positions. And there's a push on from the CFA Institute globally to try to attract more women in finance. And it's kind of unusual because in the accounting world, which is quite similar skill sets, there's more women than men. So what have you found? Like, do you find that being a woman is a positive or a negative, or do people just say Juliana's Juliana and we don't care anything about her, she does a good job or she doesn't do a good job?
Well, honestly, right now it's, being a woman in finance is very much merit based. It doesn't give me more or less advantage. We do all have to compete for the same position. So I wouldn't say I have a leg up on getting a job.
Okay. And I think that, 20 years ago, what you saw in, say, the accounting world or the law world or maybe even finance was it was up or out. You had to put in the hours to become a partner, and if you didn't put in that time and effort, you were gone. So, if a woman, for example, wanted to reduce her time to start a family or take a couple of years off, then they were just, oh, you're gone. And the world has kind of changed over the last 20 years where there's more intermediate positions where people can try to get that work-life balance a bit. And I'm just wondering if you've seen anything like that, whether it be at Concentra or just your general life in finance in Regina.
Yeah, for sure. I think the term work and life balance has been around for a while, and obviously the trend is accelerating. But with the pandemic, I believe employers are even more flexible than before, not just for women with kids per se, but also for the other gender as well. There's just more flexibility to perhaps work from home, take that afternoon off, or takes a 1 year sabbatical to just retain talent, because it is hard for employers to attract the right talent, and demographic is changing, right? We always talk about the millennial, the Generation Z. Before it was very driven by compensation, but nowadays people have slightly different thinking where can I get compensated at the same time? Can I do good to the world, right?
Yeah, and I think actually we didn't pre-discuss this, but you hit on all the key points today. Is that when Robin and I did our session on evolving skill sets, what they found was in studies is that today's employee wants a bit more of that work-life balance. And that's equally true for men as ladies. So there is that desire. And they've also found that on a hiring decision, so if I'm going to get a job offer with Concentra myself, there's more emphasis placed by the employee on the quality of the work, the training, the work-life balance than there is compensation. So exactly as you say, that the actual studies have found that employees today want that. And because of that, the companies are responding better, because the issue that you implied when you were talking was that in the old days, it was either up or out, and they lost so much good talent who just said, I'm not prepared to work 100-hour work weeks to become a partner, so I'm going to go elsewhere. And now companies are saying, hey, we can create a principal or a director role, not partner, but close enough to retain our talented staff. Because the other thing that people don't sometimes understand as employees is a company invests a lot of time and effort and capital into developing their employees. So you're a much different employee, I think, than when you joined Concentra 5 years ago. And it's a shame if suddenly you say, well, I'm not getting the experience I want. I'm going to go across the street to someone else. And then they reap the benefits of that. So I think you made some great points in that. And it's interesting to see how the actual studies bear that out. So moving into sort of technical skills. So it can apply to your job. It can apply just to what you think. So if I want to have a finance career, I'm curious as to your thoughts on what sort of technical skills, not finance related. For example, in the CFA program, we don't learn anything about taxation because it's a global exam. Whereas if you're going to be a wealth manager, you need to have strong tax knowledge. So I'm curious, if I want a finance career in Saskatchewan, what sort of complementary technical skills should I develop?
So the first type of skill that I can think of is definitely know how to use or do financial modeling. Either using Excel or other type of software. I think this is a really good skill to have in any organization. either in corporate finance or in treasury or in an analyst role at an asset management company. But maybe I might be a little bit biased, but having a bit of quantitative skills is always a plus. Like knowing how to read do report or do analysis on anything that's related to.
That's okay. I no, I get what you're saying. It's the complementary. So if I come out with a finance major, maybe I have to develop the quantifiable skills like the financial modeling and learning how to work access and these sort of tools, because that's important to move ahead. And if you actually look at a lot of job ads, you see that they often define specific programs that they want people to experience. So if you're considering a career in finance, I would probably say look at some of the job ads for sort of the 2 or 3 year graduates and see what they're looking for. Like in Saskatchewan, if you want to work for a mutual fund company or a bank, they want to see that you have your mutual fund sales license.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the same thing there. And I think the other side is, we talked about if I'm a finance major coming out, that you had said you need economics. I say you need accounting. So you can't just say I'm going to focus strictly on finance. You have to develop the auxiliary financial skills, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's as a finance major, you study finance. It's rarely that specific thing that you do. You're always more involved on the application side or IT or programming. So definitely you need to branch out a little bit in terms of your skill set.
And I think one area that I always talk about with the university students that I meet is if you want to live and work in Saskatchewan as it is today, you probably want to develop some natural resource knowledge, maybe even agriculture.
Absolutely.
Because so much of the economy is based on oil, gas, mining. And if you're an accountant, if you're finance, if you're a wealth manager, you may be working for a natural resource company. You may be auditing one. You may be working in Juliana's business and dealing with them in, say, the capital markets or the consequences of how does the oil price impact in the investing side. So that's sort of, I think, also something that I'd be curious your thoughts on, to the extent that should they develop some of that industry knowledge in the area. So if I want to move to San Francisco, maybe I need to learn about high tech.
Absolutely, that makes sense. If you live in Saskatchewan or Alberta, obviously it's a desirable skill set if you understand the oil and gas industry, or particularly if you're based in Saskatchewan or Manitoba, if you understand agriculture industry. That's very important from a lending perspective, modeling, seasonality. Those are all very desirable, and like you said, if you work out of San Francisco, you need to know about the technology sector.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the things. A few weeks ago, we did our annual big webinar, the Dinnerless Dinner, and we talked about the shift that Saskatchewan may have to experience into things like small nuclear reactors, into solar, these sort of things, because things like the carbon tax may cripple the oil and gas industry. So where can Saskatchewan expand? And I'd be curious as well, like, where do you think that, again, if I'm a university student today, looking out 5 years, or even if I'm a young professional, looking out 5 or 10 years, what sort of industries in Western Canada might be growth? Because as we've talked before, environment, social, and governance, the ESG, those are hot topics, and the CFA Institute offers certifications now in ESG. FinTech is also huge. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I guess we do need to diversify our economy, and given the oil and gas impact, especially in Alberta, there's a lot of talent in the province, and we are seeing that type of talent going into like you mentioned, fintechs or AI, and so I see that area as a area where there will be a lot of growth. Banking is one of the last sector that hasn't really faced too much disruption yet. As you know, Canada is dominated by the big five banks, and we all have heard that there's fintech or neobanks out there, and we've heard that the FANG, Apple or Google might potentially go into banking, retail banking, but using fintech technology. So the market will be facing a lot of disruption. There's obviously cryptocurrency and blockchain, and with central banks looking into even they themselves are looking to create their own currency. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, from my perspective, is that there's a lot of older CFAs out there, like me, for example. And in the next few years, if there is that disruption or evolution in the banking industry in Canada, then having that knowledge of IT and the fintech, and I think that's an advantage for the young people today because they've grown up in that. They understand it already at a base level. They're used to dealing, a lot of them already, with bitcoins and cryptocurrencies in daily life. And so that's an area, again, where if you're looking for a job and you're trying to compete against someone that may have strong financial experience, if you can exploit your skill sets in fintech or even on the environmental side, the social side, there are market niches that appear to be really growing over the next decade in those areas.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. There's a lot of regulation coming into place. I know you recently heard that President Biden will be implementing greener renewable infrastructure project, and as our closest neighbor, that is happening. Either we want it to happen or not, and that we will have impact to our industry. So it's better for us if we start making the changes rather than later.
Yeah, and I think that what you're seeing is a lot more activist minority shareholders who are demanding change, and that's also a bit of a driver that may help change the way that business is done in Canada. Now, the final area that I just want to cover here is, we talked about some hard complementary skills, some technical skills. But my view is that the farther you move up the food chain in a corporation, the less it becomes about the technical side. It's more about the interpersonal side, the soft skills, the meeting and presenting with shareholders, with executive boards, and so on. So I'm curious what you think as far as the key soft skills that students should try developing now. And maybe that's English writing skills in university, Dale Carnegie or Toastmasters, those sort of things?
Yeah, I think communication skills is definitely something that everyone should improve on, either in university or through your part-time job. Presentation skills is definitely important, same as writing. As you move up the ladder, that will become even more important. It's about communication, to your staff or to your clients. So definitely it's a good skills to have.
Okay. So that we've covered a fair bit, trying to bring sort of your career trajectory in with some of the issues that we've covered in other sessions. And I think we got a good look at your personal background and some issues that you've seen and some advice that you've passed on. Before we wrap up, I'm curious, if we look back at, say, 16 or 17-year-old Juliana in some Vancouver high school, or even when you were in college or just a few years after college, is there any advice that you'd give yourself on looking back, say, okay, here I am today as the president of the CFA Society Saskatchewan. What might I have liked to have known back then to ease my path to where I am today?
That's a good question. If I would tell the younger high school or university student is don't be afraid to explore other sectors or other topics. Just be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So improving what you're not good at and trying something new, because that's how you know what you're good at and what you like.
I think that's excellent advice. And if I think about that myself, companies like to hire people that are willing to think outside the box, willing to take on new roles, to challenge themselves. And so if I'm looking at a resume, it is indeed nice to see somebody that has tried new things and taken a chance. And I think today, like again, 40 years ago, it was get a job out of university and stick in that. And if I have to change careers midstream, I look like a failure. Whereas I think today, companies are fine with people jumping into different directions. And I think the average job lasts about 3 years. So if you're working at Concentra and you realize, this isn't for me, don't feel that anyone's going to punish you for that. If you're like 50 or 60, that may be different. But, when you're still sort of in your early 30s, you can sort of make a lateral shift if you decide that you're not happy. And you'd rather be happy, as Juliana said.
For sure. I think as a manager, I would be happy if one of my analysts got another job at another company, if it's a promotion. To me, that would be a compliment to me as a manager, that I have trained my staff really well. It's well received by other employers. So definitely, learn as much as you can and go from there. But just be open-minded to, making lateral move. Like I said, getting outside your comfort zone, doing things you don't know how to do.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add before we close off today?
No, I don't. But I would say to especially women in high school or university, is that don't close your mind to any specific major or career that you want to do. Keep it generic. You never know, which door will open in front of you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your comments today, Juliana. I think there was lots of great takeaways for listeners as far as advice on entering the CFA program, possible career paths, complementary skills. Before we close today, I'd also like to take a moment and thank our sponsorship. We have a great group of corporate sponsors that support the CFA Society, and we're greatly appreciative of their efforts. And finally, if you'd like further information on the CFA designation or some of the issues that we talked about today, hiring advice, diversity matters, careers in finance, the CFA curriculum, please visit the CFA Institute website and the CFA Saskatchewan website. We'll also have a few other interviews like we've done here today with Juliana. And there's a whole speaker series with Robin Korlak and myself discussing a wide variety of CFA-related topics. So thank you for listening today, and I hope you enjoyed it.